Welcome, welcome, welcome. Willkommen, welcome. I don't know. How's it going? Bienvenue. I don't know. My language skills are not really happening tonight, but welcome and thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Camera Shake live stream. Oops, and I can hear myself back there. Let me just yeah, thank you so much for coming on the live stream. I've got a special guest on the show tonight. Give it up for Mr. Steve Bond. I'm always, whenever I hear your name, I always wonder whether you're related to James Bond, or should I introduce you as Mr. Bond?
Mr.
Steve
Bond, yeah.
Bond.
Well, I mean, that's always the question I get asked first of all is, are you James or is he your brother? But actually, to tell you the truth and get it out of the way first of all, James Bond was my grandfather.
Right. Actually.
His real name was James William Bond, yeah. He
Well, there
was
you
the
go.
original, yeah. So,
Yeah, see, so you're actually a descendant of the very James Bond. So that's pretty cool.
oh, yes, yeah.
So in today's live stream, we've got a whole lot of stuff to talk about. Of course, live streams are a little bit different. It's live, so it's raw. Raw straight to camera. There's no editing involved in this. What you see is what you get. Not that generally Camera Shake episodes are terribly well edited. Anyhow, it's pretty much straight from the mouth, as they say. So it's not necessarily that different. It's just a little something extra. And of course, remember that if you are watching on YouTube or on Twitter /X, then you can comment, and the comments are supposed to come through to me so I can see them, so I can actually respond to them. So if you feel like you want to comment or just say hello, tell us where you are where you're listening from or watching from, then that'd be awesome, because that's the nature of a live stream. We can communicate, talk to each other. Phenomenal. Anyway, so what we're going to do is this week we're going to talk about a whole range of different things. But first, Steve, give us sort of a helicopter view over your kind of photographic career, because I know you as not only a fellow member of the Camera Club, but also you're the president of the Watford Camera Club. So just give us a bit of a helicopter view.
I am, yeah. Well, I started taking photographs many years ago. I think I was about 7 or 8 when I first started. And I've drifted in and out of photography as you do. Other things come along like wine, women, and beer. And then, of course, you get married and, these things happen. But just lately, in fact, it all started just before I retired. I got back more into photography. This was about, 8, 9 years ago, I suppose. And I realised how far behind I was. I was still very much, I suppose you could call it a happy snapper. Decided that I wanted to improve, joined the Camera Club, which helped me immensely, and the people in it give me advice. And there I've gone through various genres, improving my photography. Well, I hope I've been improving it as I go along. The latest venture that I'm doing is I've moved more into portrait photography, as you know, Kirsten, because you've been very helpful in helping us along in that with studio lighting and looking after models, etc., etc. And I'd like to think now that compared to a couple of years, 3, 4 years ago, it is now. Well, let's put it like this: I've started winning a few competitions with some of my portraits now, whereas before it was lucky if they were a happy, snappy one.
Well, in fact, you won first prize with an image that you created at one of the sort of studio lighting workshops that we
That's
did
correct.
a
Yeah,
few weeks ago.
yeah, I did. Yeah, which was one of a Model B, where we were trying to recreate the film noir type shots, which turned out to be very successful, and very pleased with the results. It was a good night, and even better when I won first prize for it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great shot as well. So it's the typical, the sort of stereotypical film noir type of shot, with the blinds and the sort
Yeah.
of, private detective type of vibe. Looking out of
Yeah.
the window of the room.
Funnily enough, this is quite perchance. I do happen to. Hang on. Yep. There's the. Hang on. Which way do we go?
That's it. Oh yeah. Oh, you've got print of it. Oh, that's really cool.
That's the print. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, that looks great.
So yes, that was. Yeah, it didn't really do it justice there, but yeah, no, it's. I'm very pleased with that one.
Yeah. Once I work out how I can fly in images live during the live stream, then I'll do that. But it's the early days
Yeah.
with the live streaming thing. So
Yeah.
there's
One
a lot
step
to
at a time, Kirsten. One step at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time. We've made it. Well, we've gone live pretty much on time, give or take a few minutes. Only one little misstep, but it's how it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope if you're listening, I hope you're enjoying it. Let me just leave a comment. Let me know where you are, because again, that's always super interesting. If you're also let me know whether you're watching on YouTube or on Twitter, because again, that's or X. I keep calling it Twitter. Anyway, now camera clubs are sort of a big thing. Not only here in the UK, but all over the place, all over the world. I know there's tons of photo clubs over in the US. There's tons over in Europe. You're now the president of the Watford Camera Club. What does that actually mean? Like, what duties does that bring with it?
Well, basically, I oversee. It's a position you hold for 2 years, and I oversee the running of the club. And I must admit, I've got a very good team, a committee behind me that actually take a lot of the load away from me. So, whereas I know with some of the smaller clubs, everything's left to the chairman or the president, and they have to do everything. With the committee I've got is very good, and they've all got their separate jobs. They work too well together as a team. So, to be honest with you, I have quite an easy life compared to some presidents.
But what does it entail? Like, what do you have to do? You oversee things like the program, for instance, for the running year in the
Yeah,
field?
well, we have a program secretary. Well, in fact, we've got 2 people working on the program, and they're working on the program a year in advance. So the ones that they're now working on next year's program for the 24-25 season, we're coming to near the end now. We break in June, and then because our season runs from September to June, so it's through the winter months and then a little bit of the summer months, and then obviously we don't really meet up during from June to September, because obviously it's the summer here, and people are on holiday. They've got other commitments, and well, some of them want to get out while the weather's nice and take photographs. Because some of them are fair weather photographers that don't like getting wet, but hey, what can you tell them?
I just take photos indoors. That's just
Yeah, you have the easy life. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
you're not like one of the landscape photographers that gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning to capture the sunrise coming over the hill, and just as they do, they have a walk in front of the camera.
Yeah, I mean, not yet. Maybe one day I get into that. But for the time being, I think I'm quite happy with where I am. I think, when it comes to that, like, give me a dark room and a bunch of lights, and I'm happy.
That's it. Yeah.
So when you put a program together, I'm guessing obviously you have to vary the program throughout the year, obviously, to keep it interesting. So what are the sort of elements that go into a typical camera club program?
I mean, as with most camera clubs, we have a monthly competition, which members can put something. Now we have we run 2 types. One is a print competition, so the members will submit. If it's an open, they'll submit 2 prints, and then we have the PDI, which is the projected digital image, which back in the olden days we would have called it slides.
Right.
The old Kodachrome ones type thing. And they're obviously just projected on the screen, and the judges then judge them what they see on the screen.
That's an interesting thing. I haven't really thought about that because obviously I joined. I mean, I joined camera clubs way into the digital age, and obviously I know that the two different categories: the PDIs, the
Yeah,
projected digital images, and the prints, where you literally have prints up on an easel, and and the judge will look at those. But of course, yeah, I hadn't really considered that in the I call it the olden days, but back
yeah,
before digital imagery, of course, you would have had slides. So were there still two separate categories at that time?
they were. Yeah, yeah. You'd still have the two separate because the slides were obviously they were projected onto a screen where they could be judged, um, and obviously the prints is more of a physical thing. So we have in our club we have a big light box, so the judge can look at the image under the same. So each image has the same lighting, so there's no difference in lighting. And if the judge wants to, they can pick the image up and study it more closely. Um, so as regards competition with the prints, it's or I should say with the PDIs, you need more of a wow factor, so that when people first look at it, they think, "Whoa," or unless you got a cute lamb or something, and it's from the rest of the audience. Um, so it's that initial thing when they see it. Whereas with the prints, they can take their time over it, and then you can ingest it more because you can see other elements that are happening in the print. If you know
And
what I
also,
mean.
yeah, I mean, the one thing I've learned really over the years is really that prints and PDIs are really two completely different animals. In a
Oh,
sense.
they are.
With a projected image, if you have if you have too much white in the image, it really hits you like a baseball bat in the head.
It
It's
does.
like if you imagine that projection on the screen, it's completely overwhelming. Whilst on a print, it might actually not come across like that, or it won't come across like that because first of all, the print
No,
is much
it
smaller.
it can work very well on a print if you've got a high key image, or a low key image for that matter. It's much better to come across on a print than what it is in PDI. Simply as you say, because of the glare, the black background glare coming from it. You
Yeah.
might get a few hot spots on it, where it's much easier to deal with on a print, and it's much easier to view on a print.
The thing that I always find fascinating is, especially with low key images. Like I love low key images, and I love it when the subject almost like fades into the background, and there are no real borders, real
Mm.
perceivable borders. It's just a style that I really love. But when it comes to PDI images, especially low key ones, there's this thing where people expect to always have like a white border around the frame of the image. And I think the idea is that we can see the edge of the image. And I always sit there and I think like, but I don't want to see the edge of the image. Like
No,
to me,
this
that's annoying.
yeah this is something that judges like for some peculiar reason. Personally, I don't. I quite like the idea that, as you do, that if you've got a low key, it just fades into the screen. But the majority of judges like a key line around it, just to see where it ends. And this is, as they say with everybody who's ever belonged to a camera club will give you a story about a judge. You know,
Yeah.
um, they have a very, very difficult job. There's no two ways about it. And I admire them because they're up the front. They have to talk about the images. Um, and a good judge will never openly criticize an image in the sense that, oh, this is rubbish. What do you do this for? But they might subtly suggest, well, if this hadn't been there and you'd have done this might have worked out a little bit better. So that's the idea of it. Although we do have some judges that say, no, don't like this.
Yeah. Although I do
But
want
of
to see
course,
those
yeah,
judges. That'd be fun.
we if ever we have one of those at Watford, then they only come once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to competitions in a little while, But what else is there as part of a program? So you've got competitions on one hand.
Yeah, we got competitions on one hand, which because one of the things that we do with the competitions, we also have through the year we have 6 set subjects for the competitions. So it's quite a normally like a broad thing that you can do. I mean, our next competition, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, the theme is something typically British. Now, that because everybody thinks slightly differently, that is quite a wide range of things that you can do. So, I mean, it could be something from taking an image of HP Source, which you can't get much more British than HP Source, to Morris dancers dancing around a maypole. You know, you've got such a wide spectrum of ideas that you can get, and I guarantee that we will get a wide selection. You know, which makes the judges' job even worse because they have to sort of judge a bottle of sauce against people dancing around a maypole.
Yeah. So I mean, set subjects are always interesting because, of course, you can be a lot more creative with those, and yet you have to channel your creativity because you somehow have to, depict whatever the subject is,
Yeah,
but
because that's the other thing that we do in the program is that before any of the set subject comes up, I mean, we might have one which might involve close up or macro photography. So a few weeks before that competition comes up, we may well either have a guest speaker come down to speak about, shall we say, macro photography, or we might have a working group where we have a practical evening where some of the members that are really good at macro will show the others hints, tips, what to do, what not to do, that sort of thing. So that all comes into the program. The other things we do with the program is we do have guest speakers. As I said, sometimes to do with the set subject, sometimes just as a general rule. But there's some very good speakers out there, and we've had some quite a few good professional photographers. I mean, we had was it last year or the year before? We had Gavin Hoy came down. He did his talk, which involved it's a very much a hands-on practical session. He'll come down. He picked a model out one of the members, and then showed us how he does various things, and it all comes up on the screen because he's all tethered in and what have you. And that was a really fun evening and a great evening. But unfortunately, as most camera clubs will tell you, that we have to find funds to fund these speakers. Because much as we love them, they don't come for nothing.
Yeah, are they expensive, or like what's the sort of ballpark?
Well, it depends. It depends. I mean, some people will come and talk for expenses, basically, whereas others will demand a fee. But we try and get a mixture. Obviously, because I mean, like someone like Gavin, when he came down, I mean, the members loved it, and we'd love to get him again, but he's a busy man.
Yeah, I think I also think he's stopped doing camera club presentations.
Has he stopped doing camera clubs?
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, because I know he does a lot. He does a lot for one of the what was it, Andromeda TV? Is it Andromeda?
Adorama.
Adorama, that's it. I was nearly there.
Yeah, he does Adorama
when
TV.
you get to my age, you muck words up. So
yeah, I think they should have called Andromeda TV. That's much cooler. But I mean, I see him every year at the photography show.
Yeah.
So he's obviously busy doing that and doing lots of other things. So I can imagine. And I mean, as somebody who creates a lot of video content, I know how how difficult and time consuming in particular it is, to
Yeah,
create that kind of content. So I'm not surprised.
yeah, because I think he does a live. He does at least one live thing every week, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he creates video content for Adorama, but he also does lives. That's right. So
Yeah,
it's there's a lot of stuff that goes into these things that people may not necessarily be aware of. I mean, I guess you can probably guess, but as always, there's a lot more that goes into it than what you can actually see.
oh yeah,
When you watch
yeah.
a video or a live stream like that, you know. So I mean, it's an interesting thing to get sort of an insight behind the scenes. In fact, this week's episode of the Camera Shake podcast, if anybody listening or watching, if you want to get sort of an insight into the behind the scenes, I hooked up with two of my fellow photography podcast colleagues, Dave Clayton and Steve Brazel, and we talked about the ins and outs of what it takes to actually create a photography podcast weekly or fortnightly, on a consistent, continuous basis. And it's really interesting how I found it really interesting how our experiences really overlap. We all have very similar experiences when it comes to the trials and tribulations of making something like that, over an extended period of time. So if you are interested in that, go and check that out. It's on YouTube or of course on any audio platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever the Camera Shake podcast is. That's where you can find it. It's called Three Guys Walking Through a Podcast. There you go. and it was fun. Yeah. So okay. So
Yeah.
we've got
As I
we've
say,
got
the other
some.
thing that we do is we have practical evenings
Yeah.
on various things where people come in. A lot of the members will get together and we will teach other members various things depending on what it is. We also do we have one evening where we do the I don't know whether people listen know, but if you set fire to wire wall and spin it round, have a long exposure, you get this lovely effect. That and light painting using various lights. The members are shown how to do that, what settings to use on their cameras, etc., etc. That's always a good fun night. Although it's here in England, it's very much weather dependent. So sometimes we've got it planned for a week and then we have to move it because it's pouring down with rain outside. But hey, that's the British weather for you. The other
Yeah.
things we try and do is basically we just try and help the members, especially any newer members, along with their photography, because some are still very much on, shall we say, automatic mode on their camera. They know and they're taking pictures like that. So to try and get them off of that, to using what the camera's for, using the proper settings, etc. And also, which is a little bit more difficult, I think, is actually try and teach them composition. And also when you're out, I mean, especially with the guys that do landscapes, it's all very well going out and taking a picture of a mountain, but if it's midday and the light's flat, it's not going to look anything. So you need to have it in context. You need to have the right light. You need to have something in the foreground, the middle ground, and then the mountain is in the background to make a decent picture. So all those things we try and teach with either examples, or we arrange outings where members can go along, which we do quite a lot. Which is anything from every year we always go to the Deer Rut at Bushy Park, which is always good fun because they do a good breakfast there in the cafe. So that's the reason I go anyway.
It's worth just for that.
It is, yeah. Their egg and bacon roll is splendid.
There you go. You've heard it here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things as I say, I've been club president now for a year, and one of the main things that I wanted to do, which I said right at the beginning when I took over, is that I wanted to bring the fun back into photography as well, um, because some people will get very much competition orientated, so when they go out and they'll take an image and they'll look at it and think, oh no, that won't, well, that won't do anything in a competition. Yeah, it may not do anything in a competition, but it could still be a really good image. And and the way I look at it is, if I've taken an image in and I like it, great. If I share it on Facebook and other people like it, even better. If I get comments, well, I'm in heaven. It's it's the other thing that we try and do is the social side as well. So we'll go out. I mean, after each meeting, there's quite a few of us which will then adjourn to the pub, or for our American friends to the bar, where over a couple of drinks, everybody will chat, and it's not necessarily photographic chat. We'll talk about everything from football right the way through to the latest Nikon F whatever it is that's come out. So it's very. And I can honestly say that I think a lot of people learn more in those sessions than what they do watching YouTube and everything like that, because it's very intimate, and it's you can ask people questions back. So if somebody's explaining something to you and you don't understand it, whereas in YouTube you might have to go back and watch it again and watch it again and watch it again and still not understand it. But when you're there face to face with somebody, you can say, sorry, I didn't get that. Ah, right, okay. And then you can take a slightly different approach to it.
Yeah, ultimately, I always say that this is one of the greatest benefits of something like a camera club, is the fact that you're in a room with people who, first of all, have maybe their own specialisms that are different from your own, but also if you combine the experience years together, you have virtually all the information you need is available in that room. You just need to go and get it. And a situation like going to the pub or the bar, after the actual club meeting, it's always a great way to get chatting with somebody, and before you know it, you learn so many different things. I mean, I remember talking to some of our older members, about film photography. I've learned a ton about film photography, just by talking to people who, have been doing this since,
That's it.
since the turn of the 18th century or something.
Oi, steady.
But it's,
Yeah, I used to have my own dark room myself back in the day before we had kids, and I could turn the bathroom into a dark room. But
that's what my dad used to do. That was the thing. I remember. Yeah, it was always, the bathroom was out of bounds. That was a red light.
I must admit now, though, I'm actually horrified to think that the amount of chemicals and what have you we just used to disperse down the drain when we weren't using it.
Well, I mean that's
and
one
we
thing,
and we and back in fairness to us, back in the day, we didn't realise what it was, what was going on.
Yeah, but of course you're also exposed to the chemicals, and that's another thing.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
You certainly are.
Yeah, I mean there's something.
Sometimes you can come out of them dark rooms and you feel pretty good.
Excellent. All right, I'll have to think about that. Well, I mean, I quite see what there's something really beautifully basic about film photography, that I really love. And actually, I do like the process of developing film. But I am quite happy about the fact that you can just send a roll off and then, get the final images back, usually in digital form. I'm not even necessarily that interested in getting an actual print back. I'm more interested in actually seeing the image, because I'd be scanning it in afterwards anyway, so it doesn't really, to me, doesn't necessarily matter.
Because the other thing with film is as well, whereas with a digital as it is now, you get your raw film, and that's it. But no matter what camera you use, you're going to get this, or the same or a very similar image, you know.
Yeah.
But back in the day when you were using film, whether it be black and white, color, or slide film, depending on the brand and the type of film, when it was developed, you'd have different styles of images coming out, which in fact now digitally people try and recreate that. I mean, you know, you get all the different screens on Instagram and what have you, so you can have the Kodak look, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah. You
there
get
definitely was a difference between Ektachrome and Kodachrome.
Yeah, I mean, you have lots of film, simulations now. For instance, the Fuji cameras that I use, have built-in film simulations, which I love. And
Yeah,
you can go in and edit them and change them and create your own little, sort of, your own little looks, which is phenomenal.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
amazing. But there's something about the sort of I don't know. There's something about getting a roll of film, putting it in the camera, and then being limited by by the amount of images they could take on a roll. And, sometimes that's not very many. Like, before we went on air, we were just, talking a little bit about this camera that I just recently got. It's a birthday present, actually.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting camera. It's a box brownie. It was one of the 12 revolutions in photography, which is super interesting. It's a great episode, great interview I did with Pablo Giori, who's a photography historian. I think it was the week before last or something. So in photography, we speak of 12 revolutions that have taken place to get photography to the point where we are now. And one of those was the box brownie. So this camera was the first camera that really brought photography to the masses, because it was the first camera that was on purpose produced so cheaply that it would be affordable to the average person. Whilst before that, photography was only, accessible to people who were wealthy. And so this one originally, they started making this, Kodak started making this in 1901, and they sold it for $1, which I think was 2 shillings in Britain. And so it was a relatively affordable thing. And I think originally what they would do is they would have a film in there, which gives you 8 exposures, right? So you could take 8 images, but then you wouldn't take the film out yourself. You would actually mail the camera back to Kodak Eastman in New Jersey. They would take the film out, develop it. They would send you the prints back and put a new roll in the camera. So they would send you the camera and the images back. So that's how it would work. So you send the whole camera into the lab.
Yeah.
But yeah, super interesting thing. 120 film. You can still get film for this. It's something that I'm going to be experimenting with over the next few weeks. It's a really cool thing. It's so basic. Oh my god, there's like zero technology in this.
Yeah, well, you got no aperture control, have you? No, all it is basically is just the shutter, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So you've got a shutter, which listen to the sound.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very simple shutter. You've got a little bit of control here. You've got this, I don't know if you can see it, but you basically pull out this little piece here. There was another control here, which is no longer there, so can't control that. That has something to do with shutter speed, I think. But basically, that was it. You've got 2 viewfinders. This is the most hilarious thing about this. You've got 2 viewfinders. So if you wanted to take portrait-style images, you would look down into the top viewfinder here. But then if you wanted to take landscape images, there'd be another viewfinder right here. So you can look down into it and take landscape images. Super, super simple,
But of course, what you saw in the viewfinder wasn't necessarily what was actually in the lens.
No, exactly, because the viewfinders, I don't know if you can see it, but the viewfinders are actually here. You can see those are the optics of the viewfinders. And it did. I think you're probably looking at a good 10, 12, 15 feet of distance for it to actually be sharp, with this thing. But that's going to be part of what I'm going to find out very soon. I'm probably going to make a video about this as well. So it should be interesting. But it's a camera that's 120 years old, still works for all intents and purposes. How well it works, I'll find out. I think the optics the lenses need a little bit of a cleanup. They're a little bit, you know, smudgy, let's say, but should be pretty straightforward. So, you know,
Yeah, that'll be
this was
interesting to see the results of that.
yeah. I have a feeling the results probably going to be much better than I think it will be. You know, so I mean,
But
I've seen some
the thing
sample
is,
images.
I mean, what you were saying before with film, the fact that it's, you take your 12, 24, or if you were really wealthy, you could get, especially in the old 35mm film, you could get a 36 exposure one.
Yeah,
But of course, 36 exposures now, you'll do that in 2 or 3 seconds.
yeah, depending on what you photograph.
Whereas
Yeah, for sure.
before, 36 probably lasts you maybe a whole summer holiday.
Yeah, and you really had to think about what
You
you really
had
had
to
to
really
think
think
about.
because you couldn't just like today. You take an image, you immediately you immediately look at the back of your camera and see whether it's right. And I think, oh no, actually maybe I should just move this way a little bit and take that out and do it. And then you do another one. Oh yeah, okay, that's great. Whereas with that, you until it came back from the developer, you didn't have a clue what it was, whether it was in
Yeah,
focus, whether it was actually pointing the way you wanted it to,
yeah,
whether as you pressed the shutter something happened, whether the light changed or whatever. It was it was a bit of a lottery.
yeah,
Even
absolutely.
I mean, even the pros will tell you it was a bit of a lottery.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about this, box brownies is it really, I found it really fascinating. So when the Titanic sank, there was another British ship, the HMS. What was it called? I can't remember. There was a British ship that came to the rescue, or the HMS Carpathia or something. It came to the rescue, and it basically fished some survivors out of the sea. And there was a guy on board of the Carpathia that took some images of these survivors on deck, and apparently took an image of the actual iceberg that sank the Titanic, so they say. But all of these images that we know now, that have survived, were taken on this very exact, not this very camera, but this very model of a camera.
If it had, that'd be worth a fortune.
I know, right? But bearing in mind that they would only have had 8 exposures on the film, these images must have been important enough for somebody to think, I will have to, freeze that in time. So I find it quite fascinating. And also this is something we talked about obviously before we went live, but because this was such a groundbreaking camera and it really made photography, like I said, it made photography accessible to the masses, to the average person. We wouldn't have cameras in our phones today had it not been for this camera. This, when you think about that, that's
Yeah,
that's quite an enormous thought. So yeah, there you go. You showed me your first camera.
yeah, I
That
did.
you
Hang on a
had.
sec. I just got to. Where is it behind here? Yeah, my first camera was also a Kodak. It's a Kodak Instamatic, which used to take a what they call a 126 cartridge film, which just used to. Oh, sorry, hang on, I'm getting the camera, getting my lens right.
That's
It's
it.
just
Yeah.
used to slot into the back there. I believe you can actually still get them.
Oh right.
Might have
Okay.
to get one and try it like that. This one had it did have a little bit more control. We had, you can see it there, which controls the aperture. It was either
Okay.
sunny or cloudy. So you had to make your mind up whether it was going to be a sunny day or a cloudy day. Or if you used flash, you put it on the cloudy.
Right.
The top of the camera there, you fitted a little flash gun which went on there. And the flash gun was a little square thing with a perspex in front of it as a safety feature because it actually used to fire a bulb. And
Oh
you used to
right.
have to
Okay.
put a bulb in there. That'd fire once, then you had to, if you wanted to take another one, you then had to eject the bulb and put another one in there. Only you had to watch how you ejected, because if you can imagine, those bulbs when they go, boom, that was like a little explosion, and many a time I burnt my finger on them. I can tell you that much. I have had one that actually exploded in there, which is a bit of a, whoa, hang on a minute, what's happening there? Because it's quite a loud bang when it goes, which is what you realise now why they put the perspex in front of it. But yeah, so shutter wise, you ready? So
Nice.
yeah, but the brownie still sounds better. The
Well,
box brownie still sounds better.
Right, his comparison sound. Hang on a sec.
Yeah. So you've got a nice click, whereas I got more of a metallic.
Yeah.
It's almost like an SLR, this one, with the mirror going up and down.
True. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, see, the thing with brownie is, it's another thing that I love about it. So the way you load the film in, first of all, I mean, if you just look into the actual camera, there's zero technology in there, like literally nothing. But then the entire inside of the camera comes out. So you basically take this whole thing out. So this is now literally just a box with a lens in the front and the shutter mechanism. That's it. And then what you would do is you would, put your roll of film on the top here. You would basically bring the film around, stretch it across the opening here, and then thread it into the spool down here. So the film would basically go all the way around this insert, and then it has top written on the side, so make sure you put it in the right way. And then basically you would put the loaded cartridge, or the loaded whatever insert, put it back in there, lock it here, close the flap, and that's it. And then you just wind up, you wind up the film. Obviously, you've got a little viewport on the back here. You just wind it up until it says 1, and you're ready for the first exposure. And then it's just literally, there's nothing else you can do other than flip the switch, activate the shutter, and then forward the film. That's it. So I mean,
and if you forgot to wind on, you got a double exposure on it.
Exactly. So it's I mean, it couldn't have been any simpler. But that's really what allowed them to make this camera so cheaply, because the actual body is made from cardboard. So it was only much later when they brought out sort of a metal casing, but making the metal casing was just more expensive. So the very first type, this type here, was sold for, like I said, $1 at the time in 1901, which I don't know what the equivalent would be nowadays, but still it'd be relatively affordable. And so it would have been 2 shillings. But for the grand price of $1 or 2 shillings, you'd have something that would allow you to freeze time. And at the time back then, that would have been quite something. And everybody would have been able to do it, which is.
Do you know how much Kodak used to charge to have the film developed and changed?
I don't know that, but that is something.
That would be interesting. Like, if anybody knows, they could let us know.
Well, good. So like I said, one of my recent guests, Pablo Giori, I'm sure you'll be able to close up on that. It'll be an interesting thing to talk about for sure. Again, I'm just about to embark onto a little bit of an experimentation phase with that very camera. I'm pretty sure I'm going to make a podcast episode and or a standalone video about that over the next couple of months or something. So, it's a little bit of experimenting I have to do with it because I'm not necessarily that familiar with it. And also I'm going to have to experiment a little bit with different shooting conditions, because theoretically I have, from the little bit of research that I've done, I have a basic idea as to, what I think would work, like a relatively bright day outdoors that should do it. I think trying to shoot anything indoors will just underexpose dramatically with this. So, but, it will take a little bit of experimenting. But I'll make sure I will,
The thing is, you're going to experiment and you're going to have fun.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I'm going to learn a whole ton. And I think
Yeah,
that's so important when, I think when you want to keep your photography fresh and you want to, try new things, it doesn't mean that I'm going to from now on I'm not going to be like I'm not going to do a Peter McKinnon and all of a sudden only shoot on film like us. That's not what's going to happen. But what is going to happen is I'm going to, I'm going to be able to expand my own horizon and learn new things. And that will have an
mm,
impact on just about anything and everything, I do. I already really like the idea of slowing down. Like you mentioned earlier, nowadays we can take 35 frames in a matter of seconds,
yeah.
or actually in many instances under a second even.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, but um but there is something to be said for actually, for slowing down and taking things uh, you know, taking things a little bit slower. And that's why I like, things that I do just to relax a little bit. I like going out into town and do some street photography, and I limit myself in what I can do. Like, I'm not going to take a zoom lens. I'm just going to take a camera like my Fuji X100V, or F even, which has a fixed lens. So I'm not going
Mm.
to be able to, use different focal lengths. I'm just going to be able to use what I've got. And then I like to limit myself even further. Like, I like to set up, like, let's say a black and white profile, like a black and white film simulation in it. Um,
Yeah.
and then I will only shoot with that. So the sole purpose of my trip will be I'm going to go into town, I'm going to do some street photography for a few hours, and I'm just going to limit myself to that thing, and that's all I'm going to do. And it's interesting how it forces you to think outside the box, you know, or it forces you to think outside of your own box, because all of a sudden you have to make different decisions from the decisions that you're used to making. If you're used to shooting with zoom lenses, you're not really used to having to use your legs to move closer, or you might not necessarily have to be as creative when it comes to angles. So it's just an interesting thing. I think I'd highly recommend for anyone to if you feel that your photography is getting a little bit stale, if you feel like you've been doing the same thing over and over again, it's a really good idea to try out different things.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I did, as I was saying with my portrait stuff. Um, I felt that although I was taking pictures, I was taking pictures of people, or snapshots of people, really. And although they were good and people were happy with them, I never was, and I wanted to create more. And I started off back in 2020, and New Year's Day 2020. I sat down. I thought to myself, I want to do a photographic project. I want to start myself a project to help me improve. And I said, right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take 52 headshots in 2020. So basically, we're talking one a week, which doesn't sound too onerous. Believe me, it is when you're trying to find subjects to take pictures of. So I started off friends, um, people I knew, even strangers. I mean, there's one of the first ones that I took was the guy from the butchery and the farm shop just up the road from where my son lives. Another one was one of the zookeepers at Paradise Wildlife Park who looks after the leopards. She just happened to come out of the thing. I said, started chatting to her, ended up taking a portrait. Everything was going along really well, and then COVID came along, and lockdown came along, and all of a sudden I was stuck indoors, only allowed to go out for an hour, and I thought, well, that's an end to my project. But then I thought, well, hang on a minute, no, it's not. So I then approached my neighbours and I took photos over the garden fence of my neighbours. Um, People outside as they were going past doing their hours exercise as we were allowed back then. Um, some of them obviously I knew, so I stopped them, sort of I forget the number of photographs I took from my front room window, leaning out as passers by. But anyway, cut a long story short, in December 2020, I completed my 52 heads project.
Cool.
So, which is all on Instagram. I kept a record of it on Instagram. So if you want to take a look, it's 52 heads. After that, I sort of sat back for a while. Still started taking a few more portraits. I then decided I want to do another 52 heads. Not in a year this time. I'll take a little bit longer. But I'm doing 52 black and white. So they're all images in black and white. It's a medium I really love, actually, for portrait photography rather. I think it's. I find it you get far more emotion with a black and white photo than you do with a colour. So that's what I'm doing there, and I think I'm up to about image 30, 38, 39. In fact,
Oh,
actually,
really?
you
Okay.
were in the original 52 heads, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Relatively early
Yeah.
on.
We met you over at Chorleywood Common dog walking.
Yes.
That's
That's
it.
it.
We all
Yeah.
your mad spaniel and my laid back spaniel.
Yeah, exactly. My
Yeah.
mad spaniel is sleeping on the couch right now.
Yeah. Mine's
That's
snoring
sweet.
his head off next door. Yeah. Yeah. So regarding that, I've also now thought to myself, well, although I'm doing the black and white one, I'm going to run another one alongside it as well. And I'm actually decided I'm going to do 52 photographers.
Okay.
So, fellow photographers, whether they be amateur, professional, whatever, I'm going to try and do 52 of those. Just, I like setting myself little challenges, you know,
Yeah.
because when you do them, you do I get a nice buzz from the fact that I've actually completed something.
Well, exactly. I
Yeah,
mean, that's the thing. It's a
yeah,
really good idea to set yourself a project, and then to start working on a project.
yeah,
And especially if you give yourself a limit, like where you have a definitive goal in mind, that's even
yeah,
better.
yeah. But I'd like to think. Well, I mean, if people have a look at the Instagram site, by all do, and please follow and what have you. But I'd like to think that if you start looking from the beginning, you can gradually see how it's come on, and I'm improving as it goes along. I mean, most of them have been natural light, although there have been a few studio ones. But now, obviously, after working with yourself and the other guys, I want to do more studio work, so we can use the lighting and what have you. But one of the things that I've been trying to do more is to get a little bit more emotion into the images I take. Um, I mean, I had somebody comment a little while back saying, what was it? I find your images really refreshing because everybody seems happy. And that's
Cool.
that's the thing I try and get across. I don't mind if people can smile in a photograph. They don't have to look serious or what have you. And that's because that's an emotion that will come across. And if it makes other people happy, brilliant.
Yeah. Again, I think it's super important, to set yourself a very specific goal like that, you know,
Mm.
and also the fact that you can measure it, because if you say to yourself, I'm going to do 52 heads, then you're going to have to go up to 52 heads. That's that in itself is good. It also kind of it opens up the possibility to then move on to a different project. And if you find that you really enjoy portraiture, then there's nothing that stops you from carrying on with another portrait project. So it keeps it relatively open, which is
Oh yeah.
really fun. What was your main thing that you used to photograph before you started that portrait project?
Well, the main genre that I do actually is animals, dogs especially. I love dogs. I love photographing dogs. I also shoot horses. And whereas, like yourself, you like doing street photography and city and urban landscapes and cityscapes, whereas I actually prefer what we call rural photography.
Okay.
So out in the country, but not landscapes out in the country. I'm talking about um, on farms, farm workers, people that work in the country, people that live in the country, So it's a different way. I mean, I've got so many pictures of lambs and sheep and cows and what have you. People wonder what I'm up to, but yeah, it's yeah. But the thing, I mean, I've got some um, in actually hanging in my downstairs bathroom is a picture of two sheep that are looking through my son's garden gate because he backs onto my field that they have sheep in, and there's these two sheep looking through the gate through a wrought iron gate, very inquisitively at me, and it just every time I see it, it makes me smile. You know,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things, I suppose.
Well, but that's the thing, when that's that's the thing. It's like if you create an image that evokes some kind of emotional response. That's really, that's the ultimate goal. And those are the images you'll come back to and you'll enjoy looking at, for a long time. And that's the thing. It's, I find that a lot with toy photography, which I recently sort of started doing a lot more of. Mainly because I'm in the middle of creating like a video series about toy photography for Platypod at the moment, and so
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying the medium. It's so much fun because you can be as creative as you want, and although the final image is cool and everything, once you get it all, once it all comes together, it's actually the process of making it come together that I really find the fun part. The whole thing about thinking about the background, rigging up the your action figures, or in particular, I'm using Lego minifigures. Trying to get them into position and trying to come up with a story for the image, and then using props and all the rest of it. It's a really fun process. And then when it all comes together, especially in the edit, when you're adding things like lightsabers and blaster bolts and whatever. Clearly, my photos are predominantly based on Star Wars.
Oh, I wonder why.
Most of the time, but it's fun. But it's a really fun thing, and I've sort of in doing that, I've realized that I kind of thought, like, why haven't I done this much earlier?
Yeah.
Like, this is so much fun to do. It's really not hard. That's the other thing. It's
No.
not difficult, and you find yourself getting much better just by doing it.
Yeah. Well,
And that's sort of the thing.
yeah. So I don't know whether you remember during lockdown when I did the series with Woody and Buzz
Ah,
Lightyear.
yes, exactly. Yes.
If anybody's from Disney's watching or Pixar's watching, I didn't really use their models. Um, but no, I mean, I got a hold of originally it was one of my grandson's models, but I got a Buzz Lightyear and a Woody, and I was using them or they were always in a situation within the normal world. So whatever they were doing, could be normal things or them getting into scrapes. And I posted a picture a day during lockdown. It went on for, I think it was about 12 months, or 11, 12 months that I actually did it for, which is a lot of images and a lot of things to think up. But the thing, I tried to make them humorous every day. And I always had a little message afterwards about, because at the time there was a lot of messages going through about lockdown and what have you, and wash your hands and all those sort of things. So I always tried to incorporate that into it as well. I was used to in the title afterwards. What was it? Stay home, stay safe. Silly little things like that. But I then had mysteriously arriving in the post. I had a small Woody arrive that somebody sent.
Right. Cool.
and various other things. Then I had somebody else contacted, another friend of mine contacted me and said that they had a Bo Peep. Did I want that? It used to belong to a daughter. And I gradually built up this whole thing of things. I had a Taz sent to me. Remember Taz, the Tasmanian devil that was in
Oh
the
yeah,
cartoons?
yeah.
A little model of them. I had a little model of Morph, the guy from Take Heart. Um, and they all joined together and they were all having these, different things that were going on, everyday situations which people found funny. And I say it lasted nearly 12 months. And when we were all allowed out again and allowed to mix, people were coming up to me and saying, "Oh, I just," because I had no idea how many people it was reaching on Facebook at the time, because I put them all on Facebook every day, and the amount of people that come to me and said, "Oh, I look forward to that every morning because it always started my day with a smile. I started my day with a giggle from looking at these images and what have you that we produced." And I thought, well, that was really good because I helped people along. I helped people through this, what was a pretty traumatic time because none of us have ever been through it before. We didn't know what to expect. But yeah, Woody and Buzz shone through.
Yeah. I mean, but again, it's one of these things, especially back in those days, back in the pandemic, it was, there were so many things that people could do to stay creative. And I remember, at the beginning, it was like, I heard so many people say like, "Oh, I don't know, I haven't picked up my camera in such a long time because I can't do the stuff that I would normally do." And I kept thinking, well, but there's lots of other things you can do, and that could be super
Precisely, yeah.
interesting. And so one of the things I thought of was like, well, first of all, I thought, okay, let's somehow try and carry on with camera club meetings. That was the first thing. It's like there's no reason why we should be not meeting up every week because we can do it on Zoom. And I remember in the very
Yes.
beginning, there was there was a degree of pushback. It's like, oh yeah, but it's not the same. Well, yeah, it's not the same. If you don't like it, don't come. But it is an opportunity for us all to hook up and actually, just talk about photography. Spend some time, on a Thursday evening, doing that when there's nothing else going on. You
Yeah.
know, and so we can keep our hand in the game, basically. A little bit. And then very quickly after that, I thought like, well, it would be cool to like do like a weekly Zoom hangout where I'll just teach some Photoshop. I'll pick a theme, pick a topic for each week, and I'm just going to show people how to do it because it's on Zoom. People can just join and we can interact. People can ask questions. I can explain stuff. There's just sort of a two-way conversation that can take place, and that was really cool. We did that for for months.
Yeah, I remember them.
Yeah, and it was fun because actually people learned something, and also sometimes I do the thing that I had planned to do, like I don't know how to color correct or whatever it may have been that particular week, and then you would just have a chat, break out the
Yeah.
beer, just have a chat.
I remember one of the little get-togethers where there was, I think he was a friend of yours, and his son was doing stop-go action
Oh,
figures.
yes,
Yeah, and
animation. Yeah,
on the mobile on his dad's phone,
that's right.
if I
Yeah, I
remember
remember that.
rightly. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean
so there was
that
some
was
really
fascinating. I mean, he was only a young lad.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting, to see how actually the whole situation really helped people in a way to get together when everybody sort of feared that it would, it would break us apart. Actually, what it did was, it created some opportunities for people to come together and
Yeah,
get involved in photography, talk about photography, and create new outlets. Like this podcast is a good example, that didn't
yeah,
exist beforehand, and that was this whole reason, as I've mentioned about a
yeah. Well,
gazillion
that was
times.
spawned really from the beginnings of the get-togethers, wasn't it, on Zoom?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically So this podcast really was a thing where, um, Nick and I at the time we'd been talking about the idea of a podcast maybe 6 months before we actually started it, and it was just one of these things where you say like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, and then you never really do it because life's busy and kids and jobs and blah blah blah, and things get in the way, and you kick that can down the road, like we do with many things.
Mm.
Um, and then when the pandemic happened, it really got to the point where everybody's watching a lot of Netflix. Every day turn out to be the same, um, and like literally, like I always say, I used to wake up in the morning not knowing what day it was,
Yeah.
because literally every day
Bit
was
like
the same.
retirement, really.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and then it got to the point where I'd wake up, I didn't know what day it was, and I didn't care anymore. And at that point, I thought I really need to change that, because I sort of felt that mindset was just not healthy at that point. And
Mm.
so, so that's how it started, and it turned out okay. So I'm not complaining.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what? How many episodes have you had now?
I think it's just over 200,
Yeah, I was
203
gonna
or
say
something like
it's
that.
got to be over 200 now, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
And you've
fun.
had some fantastic guests on there.
Yeah, I've had some amazing guests on the show. I mean, it's way beyond what I ever thought would be possible.
Mm.
You know, um,
Yeah,
like
I must say from seeing it, I mean, like there's a lot of the photographers you had on, which I wouldn't really have known about before. For example, Stockholm Sean.
yeah, Sean
Um,
Luthwaite.
you know,
Yeah,
seeing his work, and you think, wow, why didn't I know about this guy before?
yeah, exactly. I mean, there's that, and then of course there are people that I never thought would in a million years agree to come on the show,
Mm.
and give up their time, to be on this little podcast, and so it's yeah, it's been amazingly interesting. It's been humbling, massively. So I would say, I love to learn from people who are really at the top of what they're doing in whatever
Mm.
genre that would be, because, you know, ultimately I'm a portrait photographer. I know quite a few things about portrait photography, but when it comes to sports photography or or toy photography or anything like that, I really didn't have the first idea. And what this podcast has done in many ways, first of all, it's created this sort of library of knowledge. So if somebody's like interested in toy photography, there's going to be a bunch of episodes they can go to and listen to an interview with some of the leading toy photographers like Jesse Fireeisen or Dave the Bearmaker, and such like, and they are so open with the information that they convey that it's a great learning experience. And even for myself, like I mentioned videos that I do for Platypod at the moment, and it's phenomenal for me to just if I get stuck, I can just shoot Jesse or Dave the Bearmaker a message and say, hey, how does this work? Like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
How can I get this done? And it's phenomenal. I mean, Dave the Bearmaker actually just released his first book on toy photography, which is a phenomenal read. It's just like if you ever thought about getting into that genre, then that book is an absolute must read. It's it's just it has all the information that you need to get started and way more. And so it's yeah, it's just it's amazing to have access to that amount of knowledge,
Yeah.
no matter what genre it is. And that's always been the point of the Camera Shake podcast in a sense, is to have conversations with people who are really good at what they do, and to create this sort of this opportunity to get into the photographer's mind. And sometimes we don't even talk about photography. Well, very often we don't even talk about photography, which is even better.
Yeah, that's it. It's just,
So,
but I think that's a lot of thing with a lot of the top photographers. They're not. It's like a lot of people down the camera club. They're willing to share their knowledge. In some hobbies and activities, that you find, especially if people are in competition, they're very much, this is mine, and I'm not going to tell you how I do it. But I've always found that the majority of people are very willing to share what they know and help you.
And it's also, I think, nowadays with YouTube and all the rest of it, the internet in general, there's no point in hiding anything anymore because
Well, yeah,
actually,
that's it.
you
Because
know, you can
someone's gonna
get,
spill it somewhere.
you know, I mean, no matter what it is that you want to learn about, it is all out there. There's absolutely no point. And so what I found really is that maybe over the last 10, 20 years, I think people have generally become much more open when it comes to, sharing information because there is really no point, you
Yeah.
know. And it's also, it fosters a sense of community, really. And if you think about it, like you could take, people like Peter Hurley, for example, as an example. He's turned sharing his knowledge into a massive business, you know, with, creating something like the Headshot Crew, countless workshops all over the world,
Mm.
video offerings, whatever, YouTube videos, all the rest of it. It's, master classes galore, you know, product endorsements, and all the rest of it. Sharing knowledge doesn't need to be a disadvantage. Or nowadays, I think it can only be an advantage. So there's
Definitely.
no point not to do it. Because there are no secrets. You know.
No, well, that's it. As you say, there is. I mean, as soon as a new version of Photoshop or Lightroom comes out, almost straight away there's people putting stuff on YouTube and what have you, giving you all the hacks and how it works and what this does and what that does.
Yeah.
Before you've even actually got the updates yourself.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing. Um, that's one of the things I love about doing this podcast. It so forces myself to stay on top of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because if there's some groundbreaking new thing that comes out, that Adobe bring out in Photoshop, for example, then I need to talk about it on the podcast. I need to cover it. So I need to always stay on top of things like that. I remember when they released the beta version of Photoshop about whatever it was, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, whatever. When they first brought generative fill into the whole thing, it was groundbreaking. I mean, it was one of these huge things that happened that really changed the way that we use that tool so dramatically.
Oh yeah.
It was a huge thing. The AI revolution in itself is incredible, and it only gets more incredible the further we go down the road. So it's now that, for the very latest thing is the integration of Firefly into Photoshop. So now we're even past just using generative fill. Now we can create entire prompt-based backgrounds, for example. It's amazing. It's incredible. I mean, on the latest platypod video that I did, where I did a lens comparison for toy photography in particular. But then at the end of the video, I'll run through 2 shots that I created, and I break them down, and I teach people how I did it basically. One of them, I created a background image, which I then used on a screen of an ice planet, and it's basically a snowy landscape, with a very low sun, sort of evening light type of a thing. And I created that entirely in Adobe Firefly, because I kind of thought, well, I need to, I have this image in mind. I want to create this battle between, the Mandalorian and Darth Vader on this ice planet, and I need this kind of background. So rather than going and searching for a stock image or something, I could just go and actually create that background from scratch, which is amazing because you can really then create something that's completely custom to what you want to create. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. It is. It's opened up a lot of other questions as well. You know.
Of course,
I mean,
yeah,
especially in the camera club world, because you're talking about competition. So all of a sudden, there's people could use AI. And it's obviously very difficult for a judge to know a lot of the times whether AI has been used, because really when you're judging or in a camera club competition, it should be the author's own work. You know what they've created, not. I mean, yes, we will. You know, they will use AI in some forms, i.e., when they're processing their stuff in Photoshop and Lightroom. But to completely make up, shall we say, like you did with the background, um, that is, you haven't made that up. A computer's made that up.
Yeah,
Whereas
I mean,
if you, but saying that, but if you'd have gone out and taken that image and then slotted it in as a background, then that's still all your own work.
yeah, and of course, I mean, the argument there is like, when you're creating, let's say, take a background for example, the creative input is still coming from you. It's just that you're manipulating the tool to create the outcome that you've got in your mind's eye.
Yeah,
So and I know it's a it's a huge discussion, but as a creative tool, I mean, if you think about what a paintbrush is, a paintbrush basically allows you to put the idea that you've got, the image, the picture that you see in your mind's eye, it allows you to put that on paper. And in a sense, these sort of AI tools, to a large degree, allow you to do the same thing.
yeah.
It,
The difference being though is with a paintbrush, you're controlling that paintbrush.
yeah, of course, and you can argue that by creating the prompts, you're still controlling the tool as far as the AI tool is concerned, because the AI tool will just
Yeah,
it will give you options. It's a different degree.
I think we need to leave this one for another day because this could be going on for
No,
some time.
no, it's true. I mean, but the thing is, like, I think ultimately, these are
I mean, look at
creative
the
tools.
furore over Kate Middleton's picture of the her and the Prince George and what have you, and
Yeah, and so,
I mean,
and I think,
a lot of that was press hype, for want of a better word. You know, there wasn't
yeah,
much news around at the time, and also suddenly to see George with six fingers or whatever it was, that they could. It's something they seized on, and it just went viral.
I think
But
I think the thing there though is that there was an issue of passing something off for something that it wasn't, you know,
yeah,
and that's an issue, but that's always an issue. Like, you can enter a picture into a competition that you didn't take, and how is anybody ever going to know?
oh
You could
yeah,
just, that's the thing. So I think, if you do use AI in your creations and you freely declare that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You could almost argue that could, like, AI assisted photography, whatever you want to call it, could almost be its own category. Just like wildlife photography
yeah.
has its particular rules, and whatever. And so, it,
I have no argument with that at all. That if it was a separate
yeah,
category, brilliant. But it's
yeah,
when you have, shall we say, let's say wildlife, for instance.
yeah,
I mean, the wildlife guidelines are very strict, especially in
yes,
national competitions. You're not allowed to edit things out. You're not allowed to put things in. It has to be almost as seen straight out of camera. And then we had the big thing, was it 3 years ago, where there was, what was it? I think it was an anteater. And this guy used this anteater in an image. And it turned out that the anteater was actually stuffed.
yeah, okay,
And it was in, not a museum, I'm trying to think where it was now, but it was on display somewhere, this anteater.
right,
And this picture won. And all of a sudden somebody said, hang on a minute, I recognise that. I recognise that anteater. It's from so and so. And then when they looked into it and checked it, and I think they actually checked the guy's raw file and what have you to find that it was all been manipulated, and it was in fact a picture. He'd actually taken it, but it was a picture of this anteater which was stuffed. But he'd put it in a situation where it looked like it was real and
yeah.
alive.
And you find that
You
all the
know,
time. I remember a few years ago there was an instance where,
I mean,
some,
you're always going to get cheats in
yeah, yeah,
whatever thing. If there's a prize involved, somebody's going to try and win it.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I remember this situation a few years ago where somebody took, there was an image that won first prize in whatever competition it was, um, and it was an image of a section of the sky. I think was shot through, was it like through like up through a chimney or whatever it may be, and right in the center of that little segment of sky was a plane, and that plane had been photoshopped in. That wasn't actually there, but it was just not in accordance to the rules, and it was not declared. And at that point, it was like, okay, well, that's not what
Yeah.
the original photographer was passing it off to be. And at that point, yeah, I mean that's a clear fail. I just when it comes to AI in particular, I think there's, in my view, it's such a groundbreaking new technology that's so alien to a lot of people, that there's sort of a degree of fear that comes with it. Just in the same way that when film photography first changed to digital and then Photoshop came around, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would have had similar conversations at the time. Thinking like, oh, well, all the stuff you do with Photoshop, I mean, that's not real, da da da, and all the rest of it. And
Mm.
it's like, okay, and now we sort of accept it as the norm. I wonder whether in like 10 years time or something, we'll look back and we'll be like, yeah, I mean, we use AI for absolutely flipping everything. So, you know,
Oh yeah, I think it will be that will be it will become the norm.
yeah,
Um,
and
but
yeah,
as to what extent, I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
as you
and
say,
of course,
when
but
we're
it's
back
like,
in the day with camera
yeah,
clubs. I mean, when we had film and what have you, I remember that the people that first, in fact, a friend of mine, John, um, when he first started using a digital camera, and he was virtually kicked out of a club. He ended up
really,
start.
Jesus,
He ended up starting his own digital photography club.
oh wow,
Yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah. Because oh no, you can't have that. That's not
Yeah.
photography.
I mean, another thing,
But
that's yeah, and another thing that that I advocate for all the time is video. Because
yeah,
I feel like it's called a camera club, not a photography club. Interestingly enough, so that's one thing. It leaves that option open, but also. You look around a room, and virtually every person sitting in a room with a digital camera has an incredibly powerful video camera right in their hand.
oh
Right
yeah.
there
Well, in fact, everybody has on the phone.
on a phone. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But so it's like I find it amazing how often I come across that sort of fear factor, because usually people go, oh no, I don't touch video, it's too complicated, I have to learn a new skill, as in like I have to learn how to edit video, for example. When I
mm,
always think like, well, the funny thing is though that if you're a stills photographer, you've already done most of the work. You already know how to expose an image, you already
yeah.
know about composition. I mean, you've done the hard work already. The hard lifting, the heavy lifting's already done. It's
That's it.
it's
Yeah,
such a small step to then get into video. And we had this. I remember a couple of weeks ago, we had a really brilliant um, little demonstration by one of the club members who, unbeknownst to me, I completely didn't know that. Back in the it must have been the 80s and 90s or something, was very much involved in filmmaking and video, and that
yeah.
was
Oh, Barry. Yeah, and
yeah,
yeah. He actually belonged to because then there was a separate club, Watford Cinematic Society, I think it was.
yeah, and it was I found it super interesting. So I kind of thought, oh wow, there's hope yet, you know.
Yeah,
So maybe what we should do is just like we started like a little studio lighting breakout group. Maybe we should start like a little video breakout group.
yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Well, why not? I mean, I think a lot of it is now. I mean, especially for us, shall we say, older people, um, because it's whenever you think of video or cinematic stuff, it's always um, one of the drawbacks to it, if you like, was that to show your work, right? It was a case of you had to sit somebody down in a darkened room so that you could get the projector out to put the film through, or later on, obviously, they had to sit in front of a telly so you could put a VHS video in and show them that. I mean, so it's always been not an easy way to display your work. Obviously now with YouTube, etc., and reels and what have you on Instagram, for short pieces of work, it's great, because you can show them and you can
Yeah.
still see them on the phone and 15 seconds of video, and then, yep,
Yeah. And
so
and even in a, like, if you think like in a club situation, is exactly this. I mean, there's no added component other than what we do with PDIs already. You know, there's a
no,
laptop,
no, true,
there's a
true,
projector. It's
yeah,
exactly the same thing. There's no difference. I mean, like, that little demonstration the other day proved completely. Somebody puts the memory stick in. There's a video file in there. Off you go. It's just exactly the same thing as showing a still. There's
yeah.
no difference. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting thing. I mean, I love learning about people's backgrounds, like that. Whether that's whether people go back to the days of film photography and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
remember,
interesting to know. I mean, Barry's a very, very talented guy.
yeah,
I don't know whether you knew, but a lot of the music, the background music and what have you, and the title music, not only did he actually play it, but a lot of it he actually composed himself as well.
yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, and he's also a very good artist and belongs to the Watford Artists Club.
I can believe that
Society, rather.
because
Sorry.
because a lot of the stuff that he does. I mean, see, here's the thing. So a lot of the work that he does, or that he shows at the Camera Club, is very often very heavily manipulated Photoshop work. Some really creative stuff, because that's his shtick basically. It's the
Yeah.
super
Oh
creative
yeah.
stuff. And a lot of times I look at stuff like that and I think like, well, you're really not far away from AI right there, because you're not. You can argue you use a Photoshop action to create whatever effect it is. That's sort of also not your work. Just like you can argue an AI component wouldn't be your work. It's like you told the software to do
Yeah.
a thing. You know what I mean? It's a difficult
Yeah.
it's a difficult subject.
Yeah. I say, but yeah, we could go on for all night on this one.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a thing.
I was
It's
gonna
my
say, I
wife
wonder if
always
you,
says.
have you still got any viewers left after all this?
Yeah, there's a couple of viewers left. But I mean, it's one of these things. My wife always says, it's just a fluffy time where people get upset about stuff, and then they sort of hash it out, and eventually it all comes out in the wash, and everybody's happy, and
Oh
everybody
yeah,
gets used to it.
yeah. I mean, as you
So
say, in 5, 10 years' time, we probably won't even think any more of this. Although
yeah,
somebody
yeah,
did say something which made me think, well, because obviously with AI, it's I think I'm right in saying it learns from people's images, etc., how to do certain things and certain bits and pieces. So at the moment, the stuff that's being produced, where it accidentally puts in extra limbs, etc. So is it then going to look at those and think, oh, that's the correct thing from a human, because there's quite a few of those around, and gradually increase those, so that suddenly to AI becomes the acceptable norm that we've all got 3 arms or 9 fingers?
yeah, that's not exactly how it works, though. I mean, and I think we're past that as well. So initially, there was an issue with some of the AI models. There were certain things that they didn't necessarily get right all of the time, because sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. But I think we're way ahead of that now. That was 8 months ago. This technology develops and progresses so rapidly,
Oh
that
yeah,
anything we talk about today is already ancient history tomorrow. So these initial kind of hiccups, yeah, I mean, that's part of the learning, process. But I think we're way past that. I mean, you can look at every single one of those AI models. They've improved so much. Firefly have just come out with a new version, that's even better than the older version. It's just, it's exponential progress. So, you can create photorealistic images, of just about anything. You can now in Firefly, you can use reference photos. This is a super interesting thing. So this is something that I did when I created that background of the the ice planet. I used reference photos. So you can basically give it a reference photo and say like, use that as a reference, and now do this. And it won't. What it won't do is it won't just copy elements over or anything like that. It will literally just analyze that photo, and it'll go, okay, so the lighting conditions are like this. So I'm guessing you want something like that, and then you give it the prompts, and it will literally create something that looks like that heavily references that particular photo. So it gets an idea of what style you're after, what sort of lighting you're after, how artistically how you want it to look, color wise how you want it to look, and it will create something brand new that has certain that looks like it could have been from the same realm as the reference photo that you've given it, which is a super interesting thing. So it doesn't like copy elements over or anything like that. It will just literally, it's literally like you give somebody a reference photo and you basically say like, okay, well now paint something in oil, based on, as a general idea, based on that. It's like a mood board. You can put a mood board together, and then you get somebody to create a brand new piece of work just based out of those references. That in itself, it just makes the prompting process so much easier, because now I don't have to like fiddle around and change my words, my prompts and this and that, and like fine tune it the whole time. I can just give it a reference photo, and then I can give it some prompts and tell it what I want it to do, and I get to the result much faster. And then you can change the style of it. You can make it a cartoon or a line drawing, or you can make it, whatever, artistic or photorealistic or whatever it may be. And it will give you options of that. And you can take that option and then fine tune it further. And it's not necessarily a quick process. I mean, it took me a good, I would say, half an hour to 45 minutes or something to really fine tune that background image to exactly where I wanted it to be. And then I still had to go in and change a few things in Photoshop to get it to 100% where I needed it to be for that background image. But I didn't have to go and just use a stock photo where I would have said like, oh well, that's about 85% there, that'll do. I could actually create something that was exactly how I wanted it to be. Because I needed rock. I wanted some rocks coming through the snow. I needed to be in a certain composition where, because I knew I would have this fight scene in the middle and stuff. So I mean, I knew I wanted like a little bit of like a frozen water or something somewhere in there. I wanted the sun to be in a certain place. I wanted the light to be in a certain way because I knew I wanted it to be, sort of a golden hour almost type image and stuff like that. And all these, you feed all these prompts, and then you refine those prompts, and you basically tell it to change a thing. You try different things. So still, there's a lot of trial and error and a lot of like fine tuning. It's not as simple as just saying, give me this and it'll do it and it'll be perfect. So there's still, there's a creative process in there that still has to take place, because the machine will never know exactly what you see in your mind's eye. And so you still have to manipulate it, just like you have to manipulate
at the moment.
Well, at the moment, I mean, if there was an interface, I mean, but think about it this way, like, look, what if there was an interface one day that basically means that just like in a, fighter plane helmet, where they track your pupils, and, how they aim in like an F-16 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they just look at the target, and there's eye tracking involved, and then the computer knows where you're looking at this building. So, when you pull the trigger, we're going to just blow this building up, right? We just send a rocket right there. That's how they aim. And it's, you can imagine like something like that implanted into your brain, where you just look at something and you push the trigger, and then basically take a photo out of that. That photo then, gets transferred straight from the chip in your brain to your device or something like that. Just imagine that. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, at the moment you think, yeah, that couldn't happen. But think back to you being a Star Wars and a bit of a Star Trek man and what have you.
Yeah.
Think back to the first episodes of Star Trek when that guy said, "Beam me up, Scotty," and you
Yeah,
thought, "Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd love one of those." Now I've got this thing that I can actually see who I'm talking to, even if I'm in the middle of a field.
Look, if somebody in the 80s or even in the 90s, if somebody in the 90s had told you that, in only 2 decades, you'd be walking around with a handheld device that's not wired into anything, that's completely wireless, right? That allows you not only to make phone calls, but that's basically a supercomputer that's more powerful than the space shuttle
Mhm.
by a multitude of whatever, that allows you to make video calls to anyone in the world for free, like for absolutely free. You would have thought, like, yeah, that is so never going to happen. Like, dream on, right?
Yeah.
That you can take high resolution photos with, videos, including sound, for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. I mean, that you can keep switched on, that has a battery life of like, even, I mean, what is it, 12 hours or whatever it is, But even though back in the day, you keep a Walkman on for 12 hours, you're better to be dead. And that thing doesn't even do anything, you know. But
Well, the heat from the batteries would have melted the case anyway.
yeah, exactly. And so so you basically think like if anybody told you that back then, and it doesn't really seem that long ago for people of like my age and your age, the 90s is
Yeah.
like that's no time ago,
No.
we
Well, I
felt
mean,
that we were like super high tech back then.
yeah. I mean, my generation has seen the biggest growth in technology than any other generation.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you go back to the Victorian times, and the Industrial Revolution, which was at the time was mind blowing. But that is nothing to the technology that I've seen happen. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. And I sometimes I wonder like what my children will see in their lifetime.
mm,
If I think of my youngest daughter, she's almost 13, still 12, but she'll tell you
yeah,
she's 13 already. Um, you know, like she's grown up. I think she got like for her second birthday she got an iPad. I think
yeah,
and so she's grown up with touchscreen technology. To her, wireless is normal. That's
yeah,
that's just how things. She's always perplexed when you have to plug something into something.
yeah.
Um,
But I
and
mean, it's even simple things like, I mean, back when I was a kid, you used to walk up to a door and think, "Oh, wouldn't it be good if this door opened automatically?"
yeah, yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, you
Would
don't
it be
even have
cool
to
if
ask it. You just walk up to something, and it opens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
You know?
even like things like simple things like smart home technology, like even simple things like Alexa, for example, or Siri, or anything like that. Voice assisted computers. Essentially, you just ask them anything, they'll answer back. You know, it's that in
Yeah,
itself is phenomenal. But of course, you translate that to you bring AI into that because things like Siri and Alexa, they're still relatively stupid in
mm,
comparison to AI technology. I tried out ChatGPT's voice assisted thing the other day, and I have to say I'm really perplexed in how well it works. It works so much. I'm never going to type anything into ChatGPT ever again. I mean, the voice recognition is so good. It's yeah. I mean, it's actually so much better than anything that I use on my phone. Otherwise.
yeah,
So you know, it's yeah.
yeah,
It's a whole and how quickly that technology has developed as well, like AI. I remember doing an episode. I think it must have been where we now 24. So August 22. Yeah, so August 22, I did an episode um, about AI with one of the sort of leading um, sort of experts when it comes to AI technology and imaging. And Dali had just actually no. So in August, yeah. So August 22, I did an episode about Dali. Dali was just in the news. It was big news at the time. It was this prompt-based image generation engine that blew everybody's mind. Incredible. So that was in August. In November of that same year, so only a few months later, I did an interview with Micah Burke, who's one of the sort of leading AI image generation people. And even by that time, DALL-E had already moved on an entire generation. And whatever we were talking about in August was literally ancient history at that point.
Yeah.
Like the technology had raced ahead at such an incredible rate that everything that we were talking about only like 3-4 months earlier had already was completely outdated. And it's this thing, you know, where you just realize that technology is getting so much better so fast. You know, like the time it took to get from the original iPhone to like something that resembles what we're using now. Even if you think like the time between the original iPhone and the iPhone 8, I think the iPhone 8 is probably something that can do most of the things that we would do with our iPhone now. You know, although of course whatever we're using now, the 14 or 15 is so much better and faster at it. But I mean, that's like 10 years between, 10 or 12 years between the iPhone 1 and the iPhone 8, you know, if not more. But the speed at which AI develops is just absolutely unreal, you know. So who knows where this leads?
Who knows?
Yeah, so it'll be, you know, it's definitely interesting. This, you know, I always think like, so there's two things I think. First of all, there's no way of stopping it. It's going to happen. That's the one thing, you know, so you might as well swim with it. But here's the other thing. You know, people often complain about AI and stuff. And I always think like, well, but if you don't like it, don't use it. Like nobody's putting a gun to your head and says you have to use AI from tomorrow.
That's perfectly true. Yeah.
You know, like
it's,
even
it's like everything, isn't it? I mean, it's, you know.
Yeah. Like in photography, you know, take competitions, for example. Like if you don't want to use it, don't use it. Like, you know, if you want to go out with a film camera, do that. Awesome. If that's the thing that floats your boat, 100% behind you, you know. It's super cool. But, you know, if you like to be creative and you'd like to do crazy things with Photoshop and whatever, you know, if that's your thing, do it. You know, definitely, you know, do whatever. So it's all good, you know, as long as, I think, in my view, you know, as long as you find something that, you know, that takes your creative fancy, then by all means,
do it. Yeah.
Go and do it. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I would say is, as regards like camera clubs and competitions, is if you use it, declare you've used it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, and also
there's no shame in it, but you know, it's when people try and use these things, but don't. They try and pass it off as their own, if you know what I mean.
But that's of course, you know, that's true for all competitions of any sort.
Oh yeah,
you have
of course,
you have a set of rules. You get to play within the rules. The minute you don't, then you know you're out, and that's that's perfectly cool.
It. I mean, you know, it's like I mean, Formula One. They got a set of rules. How you interpret those rules, whether you've got the money to interpret those rules. You know, that's the difference between winning and losing.
That's it, and you know, you push yourself as far as you can within that regulatory framework. You know. And that's really the thing is to see how creative you can get within that. But you know, it's the same. You mentioned wildlife photography earlier. There was some very strict rules as to what you can and cannot do in a wildlife shot if it's supposed to be in that category. You know, and if your photo does not necessarily comply with all those rules, but put it in a different category. I mean, it's nobody's putting a gun to your head saying like you have to put this in a wildlife competition. No. You don't. You just. So my lights behind me are going off. But yeah, I mean that's always the thing, you know. It's you know, nobody's forcing you to do any of these things, you know. If you don't want to take digital photos, but you'd like to go out with a film camera and just do prints, well then don't enter anything into the digital projected images competition. I mean, why would you? It's like nobody forces anybody. So that's always the thing. Anyway, on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up. Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you on here on our live stream.
Thank you. And you?
And for those of you, if you made it through listening this far, then well done.
And I
you
think you
know,
deserve a medal.
yes, absolutely. So these live streams, we said at the beginning we're going to try and keep it to an hour. That obviously didn't happen.
Yeah,
So
what is it? Oh, yeah. I think we got a little bit over that.
yeah, a little bit over that. Maybe I'll try and structure it a little bit in upcoming live streams. Yeah, but let me know, if live streams are something that you're into, then I'll do them more regularly. So that's what I'm thinking anyway. That would be cool. But Steve, thank you so much for coming on the
It's a
Camera Stream
pleasure.
podcast.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. And I will see you, I think, this Thursday. Well, I see you
Oh
all.
yeah.
If
Oh,
you're watching, I will see you this Thursday. But I will
yeah.
see
By the
you.
way, I forgot to say happy birthday for last week.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, and that was me. That was me being very confident that I would be able to come to the meeting, and I'm like, and then my wife goes, "Yeah, but you're not going." And I'm like,
Yeah.
why not? She goes, "Well, it's
But
your
you got to
birthday."
do the teas this week. You know that, don't you?
Oh well, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I know, I owe you that. Fantastic. So everybody, thank you so much for watching. I was going to say for watching and listening, but you can't really listen to this. You have to watch it. And we'll be back again. We'll be back with a regular episode on Thursday at the usual time. Do me a favor and go and check out this week's episode, 3 Guys Walk Into Your Podcast, where I have a great chat with my buddies, Dave Clayton and Steve Brazel, about the ins and outs of running and producing a photography podcast. You'll absolutely love it. Anyway, Steve, thank you so much. And
Pleasure.
we'll see you again next Thursday.
See you soon.
And I'm saying that, and now I just have to find the right button to
Get rid of us
end
all.
this session. Exactly. Right. See
Oh,
you
I've
again.
just seen that.